discuss how classification systems have undergone several changes over a period of time. So students, let us learn how classifying organisms into different categories went on changing over a period of time. So students, it was not few years back that people started classifying the organism or grouping the organism. It was done centuries ago by the biologist Aristotle. So we know, students, who Aristotle is. Yes, he is the father of biology. So he started studying living organisms. He observed them and grouped them into two categories. So he grouped the organisms into plants and animals. So he was the first person to group the living organisms into two categories, that is plants and animals. So under plants, all plants were grouped together. Now further, based on the certain characteristics of plants, he grouped them into herbs, shrubs and trees. So big plants, or we call them as trees. So this classification, this grouping was done based on the height. So all small plants which grow above the ground surface, they are called as herbs. They include grass, mint, methi, coriander, all those things. And similarly, plants which are of medium height, which grow in bushes like rose, tulsi, wheat. So these plants were called as shrubs. And the last category, where the plants grow very tall and they have a wooden trunk. So these plants were called as trees. So based on these categories, Aristotle grouped plants into herbs, shrubs and trees. And similarly, animals also were classified based on several characters. So one such characteristics is habitat. So if they are aquatic in nature, so all organisms which live underwater were grouped together and called aquatic organisms. Which live on land, they were called terrestrial organisms. And all organisms which live on trees, they were called aerial. So based on the habitat, living organisms were grouped. The second characteristics to classify the organisms was presence or absence of red blood cells. We know that there are millions of organisms on the earth. Not all animals contains RBCs in their blood. So there are certain invertebrates which do not contain RBC. So based on the presence or absence of RBCs, animals were classified. And the last characteristics, based on the egg laying. So birds, amphibians and reptiles, they lay egg. So they were grouped together. Mammals which gave birth to young ones, they were grouped together. So having these three characteristics in mind, Aristotle grouped animals into different categories. Even though this system was the first step of classifying, it failed due to many reasons. As we all know, in the aquatic habitat, there are different kinds of organisms. It includes invertebrates, vertebrates, undervertebrates, amphibians are there, reptiles are there, mammals are there. So we cannot just group all these organisms under one category. To solve this, the next system came. This was introduced by Linnaeus. So he is Linnaeus, the father of the taxonomy. He worked on the classification system of Aristotle and gave two kingdoms. So these kingdoms were Kingdom Plantae and Kingdom Animalia. So all plants were grouped under one category and all animals were grouped under one category. So this classification was done based on the presence or absence of cell wall. If an organism has got cell wall, they were grouped under plant kingdom. If they are able to produce their own food, again they were grouped under plant kingdom. And if they are not able to move from one place to another. So keeping these characteristics in mind, Linnaeus grouped the organisms under Kingdom Plantae, that is presence of cell wall, autotrophic in nature and which are not able to move. And similarly, to group the organisms under Kingdom Plantae, he considered three characteristics: absence of cell wall, organisms which depend on the other organisms for food, that is heterotrophic organisms, and which are able to move from one place to another. Now, organisms which possess or which exhibit these characteristics were placed under kingdom Animalia. So, Linnaeus' two system of classification, that is two kingdom of classification, kingdom Plantae and Animalia, was better than Aristotle, but there were certain drawbacks. He was not able to differentiate organisms with the type of the cell. The unicellular, prokaryotic and eukaryotic were not able to differentiate by Linnaeus, and he was not able to group all the multicellular organisms into different categories. Like we know that multicellular fungi, they are not able to move from one place to another, but they show certain plant characteristics. They have a thallus plant body. So he grouped them under kingdom Plantae. So this was a confusion, and to solve this, the next kingdom came, and that was three kingdom of classification, which introduced kingdom Monera. So here the organisms which were unicellular prokaryotic were separated and made another new kingdom, that is kingdom Monera, and all unicellular eukaryotic were placed under kingdom Protista. And the next kingdom, that is kingdom Plantae, was introduced, in which all multicellular autotrophic organisms were there. So by now there were four kingdoms: kingdom Monera, kingdom Protista, kingdom Plantae, kingdom Animalia. Later, R.H. Whitaker introduced the fifth kingdom, that is kingdom Fungi. So he separated the fungi organisms that are multicellular in nature, heterotrophic, and which shows thallus plant body, that is not differentiated into root system and shoot system, and which lack chlorophyll. So all these organisms were separated and added in a separate kingdom called kingdom Fungi. So right now we use the five kingdom of classification, which includes Monera. So all the organisms in kingdom Monera are unicellular, prokaryotic in nature. All the organisms in kingdom Protista are unicellular, eukaryotic in nature. Kingdom Fungi are multicellular, heterotrophic, eukaryotic in nature. And kingdom Plantae are multicellular, autotrophic organisms which are not able to move from one place to another. And the last one is kingdom Animalia, which includes multicellular, eukaryotic, heterotrophic organisms. So we started with two kingdoms, that is Plantae and Animalia, and ended with five kingdom of classification. So during the course of classifications, the classification system have undergone several changes from 2 to 3 kingdom classification, 4 kingdom and 5 kingdom. So at present we are using the 5 kingdom classification, which was introduced by R.H. Whitaker.